We're going to get through this share, and then we'll pause for questions if questions are coming up.
Sure. So mine is actually somewhat similar, but at a much smaller scale. So I am essentially.
Okay, time to switch to the other person telling their story. 2 minutes of sharing from the other side.
The library is about 3 there's about 50, 60 people about 10, 12 are developers. One of them is an organizer. And that's really working well. Doing fine, although, we just lost 4 people, so we have to get that. But alongside that, I have another group which is doing very similar things, managing the content. So they do a lot of things in parallel with each other. They don't necessarily share anything back and forth. And they've experimented a little bit with, it would be great to have these two groups working together. Yeah, I mean, in one sense, if I were limited to just that group, I would have to be able to get all the air cups I need. The cover that I need is for my career. Okay, we're going to have to slow down in one of these other areas. I think the bigger challenge is actually
Okay, that's the end of the share. We got 1 more minute of reflection and feedback. One of the challenges I faced was I tried to agile development methodology and Scrum and said this was training, which was, since we're in an academic institution, there are a lot of resources. We talk to our developers and see how that makes sense, but then they start to understand more. So they first All right, now I'm pausing for questions because I saw some questions coming up at the beginning of that. Does anybody have a question? Spencer, no, you're just moving. Anybody else? Well, so to me it's a pretty easy, it's a pretty easy feed, but it doesn't mean they're all on the same level. So for instance, there was a guy that worked at PayPal that got acquired. He was pretty famous. He was a nice man. One of the first things he did when he came into PayPal after, he signed off on his RSUs and everything was he pulled down some code that he didn't know anything about. And he tried to build it, and it threw like ridiculous build exceptions. So he fixed them, and he sent a pull request back to the mothership saying, if you merge this, all of these build exceptions will go away. There were literally a dozen meetings at various levels of the company about this behavior that
They were really confused about what it meant, you know? And he would very patiently say, see, if you merge that, there won't be any more build exceptions. Like, and they'd say, that's all it does? Yeah, you can read the code, that's all it does, right? It took a lot of meetings before they finally merged it, and they were like, why would that guy do that? But it's kind of cool, you know? He had to be one of my guys, because if he didn't like what we were doing, then, right? And so he was critical, but he wasn't necessarily air cover or ground cover. There's been it's not.
Can we get this re-unmuted, please?
This is WM3. There. All right, did we get that slide yet?
Nope, still loading.
So my last slide hasn't loaded yet, but I'm waiting for it to, because there it is, hasn't finished yet. Because it is an appeal for the raffle that NearForm brought to this party. We don't have enough rafflees yet, so in the next break, we need you to make your way to the booth, the one with all the t-shirts, to you know, get your raffle ticket. And we're raffling off a pair of AirPod speakers, you know, so if you don't have a Mac, then I don't know what that means. Sorry, I'm not, can you see I'm not up on what works and what doesn't across the platforms anymore. Okay, so, did anybody have any learnings from what we just did? Anything at all? Yeah? Yeah, it helps you understand where you are in the situation. There you go. So you learned something. Anybody else? Everybody else was just like, God, I can't believe she's making us do this. Yeah.
The first pass I didn't consider some of the lower level devs as being critical, and then talking to her, I realized that it was without that couple of as well.
Oh God, you're just making me so happy, Spencer. Thank you. You need the pond scum. Yeah. Anybody else? How was like? You had a lot of conversation. What did you learn?
I mean, context matters enormously. So a lot of the things that we discussed are very different in my context than some of the other. But there are also still some very common themes and sort of major observations that span across. So it's important to try to find this commonality.
Yeah, that's a really good takeaway. Sorry, my judge just decided now is the time. All right. I hope that you'll take the time to look through the rest of the workbook and see if any of those things look interesting to you. For this audience, I'm happy to talk to you about what's in that and why those pages are there and what the point of that exercise was. And I have found over the years of being a change agent, that one about changing shoes with the person, the metaphor for walking a mile in their shoes, can be super useful, especially for your detractors. Try to understand where they're really coming from. It's easy enough to say, yeah, they just don't get it. But what do they get? And why are they stuck? You know? Gosh, I'm really sorry. Happily, I'm just about to be done talking. Well, what I wanted to do with this was give you just a little taste of what this workshop is like. It's possible, so we have a practice in NearForm of workshopping a number of different kinds of transformations. We have one for continuous integration and delivery and DevOps generally. We have one for Agile. We have one for moving to a platform like Node. We have this one. And they've been pretty useful at cutting to the chase. Instead of letting companies spin up efforts without thinking through all of this stuff and exposing, you'll notice the very next page is the sort of things to think of when doing a cultural inventory. And if you read through those, you'll be like, wow, that was a lot to think of. But they're all really important questions to answer when you're trying to figure out if your company is going to be able to pull this off. And even if you're not going to get, to your point, Rob, even if you're not going to get all the way to, you know, a majority of the pull requests are coming in as InnerSource, that'd be kind of weird. There's still day work right? This is just a way to deal with the fact that there's not enough cross-communication and cross-collaboration. But you still have day work in your own repository, right? So I actually think, you know, somewhere between 15 and 25 is pretty normal for InnerSource in the first instance. Now, some of the stuff that Cedric left out of the very sad story of PayPal losing its way in InnerSource since I left are some of the gains that we had. So we were talking about this while we were doing the stopwatch thing. There was a group in India, which I wrote about in the last book, or most recent book. They were getting defunded. They were going to do a domestic offering for India, but they fell below the line of funding. The guy had worked at Sun, and Sun used to work this way, so he was comfortable with what I was talking about when I explained this out in India. And he came to me and said, what do you think? Could I use this to keep my project alive until the next funding cycle? And I said, well, that's a really interesting question. I'm happy to help you if you want to give it a go. And so I trained his team, did bespoke training for his team, and then I left them alone. And they, by themselves, did so well in that year of influencing other teams to create hooks so that the thing that they were writing, which was a domestic application for PayPal for India, could actually be written. They made a shell, and all the services that were possible to instantiate could come into the shell, but it required some intersourcing from the other teams, right? They got so far down the road in terms of progress that the next funding cycle, they were refunded, and they were able to push a product in less than a quarter because they'd already done all the work. Now, they sent me a pretty detailed, very long presentation about the various things they had to do to get that to happen. They were working against the fact that they were remote in India, and so they had to, you know, get up in the middle of the night to schedule meetings with the mothership, but they were willing to do that if it was going to get them where they wanted to go. They had to do a lot of presentations about what it means when somebody gives you a gift of code, so they did a lot of training in India for me because they needed those people to understand how it all worked. But it was a huge success story. Never would have happened if we hadn't started having the conversation. So we didn't only educate a bunch of people about how badly they wanted to leave the company that we left ultimately. Along the way, we proved a lot of things about why it would be good for them. That doesn't mean that they're going to hold on to that without constant reinforcement. Change is hard to maintain. You have to get through a generation and to make it stick, right? So anyway, I hope it was useful to you. I think, where's Jacob?
He's back there.
Back there? Do you want to talk about schedule, or do you want me to? I think you want to. Cedric knows.
We got some changes. We're going to try and shorten up some of the upcoming talks. One question: are we supposed to scan this to enter the? What happened? Oh, it doesn't work.
Go to the main InnerSource.events.
On InnerSource.events, there's a link.
There's a tab.
A tab.
Yes, a menu item.
Okay.
There's contest.
Content. Okay, so on the InnerSource.events website, there is a contest tab that you can hit.
And you're supposed to answer this question. Open source is art, InnerSource is
Pain.
science.
So for the next few talks, we're going to try and shorten them up a little bit. For the governance, we're going to be doing a very short update. Jacob's given me the 5-minute sign, and we will attempt to collect questions and input during the happy hour. So rather than do the interactive part here, let's make it part of our discussions outside. And we're going to hold the rest of the questions for happy hour and dinner so that we can keep going through, get the rest of our awesome presentations, and not miss happy hour. I think that's the big point, right? We don't want to miss happy hour. Agreed? All right.